It is 10:02, so I'm going to go ahead and get started so Jim gets all his time. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in on a Saturday morning for a virtual caregiver workshop. My name is Candace Krestensen, and I'm the coordinator for the Caregiver Coalition of Northeast Florida. So we're already into the month of November, which is a really special month for a lot of reasons. We have the holidays, we have Veterans Day, and it is also National Family Caregiver Month. And this is a month to recognize and honor the more than 90 million caregivers and growing here in the United States. So this year, National Family Caregiving Month takes on a whole new meaning because of COVID-19, I think, and more people have found themselves new to the caregiving role. And then those who have already had the responsibilities may be feeling more pressure from social isolation, increasing fear for their loved one's safety, and for their own safety. So as we enter the holiday season, all of these challenges could kind of cloud the holiday spirit. I think they call it holiday blues, and the traditions we felt so connected to. So in today's workshop, it's our hope that you leave with an idea of how to find joy and appreciation despite the day-to-day challenges of caregiving and the added obstacles of COVID-19. So joining us to share his expertise today is Jim Monahan. Good morning, Jim. Thanks for being
Good morning, Candace. Good to see you.
Bright and early for you.
Very.
So Jim has over 25 years of experience with hospice, including patient care, bereavement support, education, and executive leadership. He's developed caregiver support programs and is also a caregiver himself. So thanks for joining us, Jim. And before I pass the virtual mic over, I really quickly want to go over a few housekeeping items. So the session is being recorded and it's going to be posted to our website afterwards. I'll post it probably sometime in the beginning of next week. All cameras and microphones, except for those of our speakers, have been turned off, and we ask that you remain muted until we reach the Q&A session. If you haven't already, you may want to turn on speaker view in the top right corner of your Zoom screen so that you can better see the speakers. If you find yourself with any questions during the first half of the session, during Jim's presentation, you can type them into the chat box and I'll make sure that they get answered. If Jim doesn't see them, I'll make sure I read them out loud so we can get through them all. And when we begin the Q&A, you can just type into the chat box and I will make sure everything gets covered. At the end of the session, we're going to hold a short poll on what you liked and didn't like about the session. And that just helps us continue and improve each session. We're almost to the end of the year to our last session. So we've got big plans for 2021. So everyone that fills out the survey will be eligible to win a $50 Amazon gift card. And we will reach out to the winner by email after the session. And lastly, in case we run into any kind of technical difficulties, please be patient. We're going to try and resolve them as quickly as possible. So Jim, I'm going to hand it off to you. You're welcome to share a little bit more about yourself, and I will get you started right here. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, I guess you can hear me now, huh? I've been handed off to.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see your names and see Candace's face. I want to say hello and good morning from sunny Honolulu, Hawaii, where I'm sitting right now, except it's not too sunny. It's about 5 a.m. When Justine Conley and Candace asked me to do this workshop, I said, sure, I'd love to do it back for my old friends in Jacksonville, in the Jacksonville community. And they said 10 a.m. And I said, fine. But then I said, wait a minute, who's 10 a.m.? Well, you're 10 a.m. and my 5 a.m. So good morning, and I mean morning. It's good to be here today. Candace said a little bit about my background. I've been doing hospice work probably close to 30 years now and have learned a lot about caregiving from the families of the patients that I have visited with and provided bereavement support for over the years. Hospice, as you know, provides care to the patient and the family. So there's been a lot of families that I've visited with and helped to admit over the years, and been through the decision making with them to start hospice care and then help them to adjust to life after the person was gone, after hospice work was finished and the bereavement work started. I think more importantly, though, I learned about caregiving and more about caregiving when my wife and I cared for my mother-in-law, her mom, Terry, who we love very much, and for my mother, who died February 14th of this year. She lived with us for a while, and then we were secondary caregivers when my sister took mom into her house where she lived until she died on Valentine's Day, fittingly. So I've learned a lot, taken a lot of notes along the way, done a lot of research, spoke about it a number of times. And when I worked in Jacksonville, I worked with a lot of caregivers there. So it's good to be back with you. Let's start with the next slide, please. Thank you. When Candace said, let's talk about the joys in caregiving, I thought, well, that's going to be a stretch. But when I really just sat down and started thinking about it, I realize there are a lot of joys, but sometimes they're hidden. They're hidden under the day-to-day reactions that we have to what we're doing, to what we're going through, to what our loved one is going through, to what the rest of the family is going through, and hidden by the world who we don't seem to see is going through the same thing. You know, I cut this out online. This might be Amazon or somebody is selling. Excuse me, I guess my voice still thinks it's 5 a.m. Somebody's selling Thanksgiving and holiday spirit for $214.99. You can get a gourmet turkey feast delivered. How 2020 is that? We used to cook those things ourselves. But it seems like the world all around us is focusing on the coming holidays. Over the years, I've done a lot of grief in the holiday workshops, and really the holidays begin in October, if there are kids in the family, when Halloween starts, and then we have Thanksgiving, and then the other year-end holidays, most of them religious-based, but certainly cultural holidays. So the world is really geared up. Here in Honolulu, there's big, tremendous blow-up Santas. They've been here since I've been here. And it just seems a little bit too early to me, but I think I say that every year now. We probably all do. But a lot of it, most of it is the marketing. I've been hearing people this year, though, say that they're getting the decorations out, getting plans ready. Because of COVID, they want to focus on something positive. So all of the holiday paraphernalia is coming out and plans are being made to sort of counter the drudgery of the pandemic avoidance. So next slide, please. This picture is typical of what a holiday is, except, you know, it would be nice if we were so mixed, a group of people over to the house like that. I don't know how realistic that is. It would be nice if it were true. But this is people who are happy. They're having, it looks like a little bit of wine, some good food. If you're a carnivore, some good food. I don't think that's tofurkey on the table. And next slide, happy families, happy times. And I got that from the AARP website. And I just love the AARP website. Whatever we're dealing with, caregiving, many other issues, please go there and look. You'll find some really good answers and good suggestions there. So the question is this the year for you to change up Thanksgiving dinner? Next slide, please. And let's take that a step further. Is this the year for us to change up Thanksgiving and the holidays if we are in the midst of caregiving? Not just the dinner. The dinner is the big thing. The thing that I've heard all of my life, it takes hours and hours and hours to prepare for, and just it seems like a matter of minutes, it's over. So a lot of energy goes into that, a lot of physical energy, but a lot of emotional energy goes into the dinners too. Next slide. When you think about it, what is holiday time? It's a time for family, a time to be together, a time to relax. If you're not the one doing the cooking and cleaning the house and getting ready for the company, it's a time for good food, and it's a time for giving and receiving. And a lot of this is beliefs, a lot of it is cultural, a lot of it is marketing, and a lot of it is true, certainly not all of it. But we're led to believe that it is. And the danger of that is we're led to believe that it should be true, that this is how it's supposed to be and it should be. And that's where the holiday stress, the holiday blues, and the holiday grief comes in, because we don't have what we think we ought to have. Next slide, please. Can there be joy in this holiday season? That's the question. That's the question that we need to answer. And the answer is within us. We can decide yes, or we can decide it's impossible. I think Henry Ford said something about, I've encountered many impossible things in my life. Some of them really were. I think this year joy can be more than we think it can be. Thanksgiving and other holidays are different than past years, and that's true if this is our first year of caregiving or the 10th or the 20th year, because sometimes it does last a while. And then on top of the caregiving, it's different. COVID, the precautions, and just the threat of the disease is looming over us. And that just adds so much more to the holiday season, caregiving or not. But in our case this morning, certainly for caregiving, COVID just adds a heavy layer of stress on top of it. Next slide. So what helps? What helps us find joy? There's the question. I know you didn't tune in to hear how bad it is. You could have done something else and known that already. So let's go to the next slide and see what we can figure out here. There are a few things that I've seen over the years that help us in difficult situations. And the situations could be that we're grieving the loss of a loved one. I think in caregiving, we certainly are grieving. It's a way to look at it. We're grieving the loss of the life that we had with the person we're caring for. We're grieving the normal things of normal life, if there is any such thing. I think it's more in our mind than anything is normal life. But any change brings about a sense of loss. And there's a lot of losses, many losses in caregiving for ourselves and the person we're caring for, the rest of the family. At times we're worried about kids in the family because of the caregiving situation. What I see helps is to understand the situation. You know, sometimes we just want to avoid it and not think about it, and sometimes that works, but we really have to understand what's causing the stress, understand maybe what can make it better, maybe understand the disease that the person has, dementia, advanced other diseases. To express it, that means to talk about it with somebody else, to write about it, to do whatever is necessary just to sort of get it out of ourselves, not to bottle it up, but just sometimes it's yelling and screaming, hopefully by ourselves, but maybe with somebody else, but just to not keep it in, to validate it. And I put that in there because that means we need to acknowledge how difficult this is. We have to say, this is tough, and accept it at the level that it is. And it helps to hear from somebody else, you're going through a tough time. A statement as simple as that really does help. And then to act, to do something to change, maybe not the situation we're in, but to change the way we perceive it. Just a quick story about these tasks or these items. When I was working with hospice in the field, I was visiting with a husband and wife, and he had advanced dementia. And I was a counselor, like a social worker, going to visit them about probably weekly. Back then, we saw patients a whole lot more than they're seeing now. And I called her Dorothy. I've changed her name over the years. Who was caring for her husband, and she was doing really good care. And I went there one day, and I was talking with her and just listening to her, and she was telling me what she was doing and how with his dementia, he really couldn't even turn himself now, certainly wasn't expressing himself, wasn't interacting with her. And she went on to tell me that she really saw that over the years they've been married, this was a couple years back, and they were married a long time, she felt like she was losing him for the third time now. She said the first time was in World War II when they were married, and he was taken prisoner by the Germans, and she didn't know if he was going to come back or not, and he did. And they were married and had a good marriage since then. She said the second time I lost him is when the disease took his personality, the dementia took his personality, and he was not the man that I'd been married to. And she says, I know now I'm losing him for the third and final time. And I sat there and, you know, using my counseling skills, I probably nodded and said, tell me more, instead of saying, well, at least he's not going to be suffering anymore, and at least, you know, your life will change, it'll be easier. But just let her express it and get it out. At that point, there's a knock on the door, and our hospice nurse came, and she said, Dorothy, the nurse's aide is not working today. I came to give him a bath. And she said, no, you're a nurse. You don't have to do that. I'll do that. And she said, I'm a nurse and I will do that. And she went into the bedroom and gave him a bath. And she said, you just sit here and talk with Jim. And about 20, 30 minutes later, the nurse came out, and she was covered with water, and she just plopped down on the big chair in the corner. She says, how could you do that? She says, I've been a nurse for years, and it was just so difficult to turn him and bathe him and dry him. She says, I don't know how you've done that. And Dorothy looked at her and she said, you understand. And I think there was a sense of healing then. She was recognized, validated, not honored or praised, but people just understood what she was going through. And I think that really helps this process of caregiving when people say, it's tough what you're doing and you're doing a good job. So those are the different tasks I think that help. We don't have to do all of them, but just sort of keep them in mind. Next slide, please. So what is this thing that we're talking about, this holiday blues, the grief, the change? You know, it's all of the negative emotions, anxiety, sadness, the stress, the weariness, and I should have blank lines in there and you could fill in the rest because you certainly know this. Next slide. And as Candace said, it's the holiday blues. That's a good name for it. And there's plenty of workshops on that. You can Google it and get many, many more tips than we'll give this morning. So there's our little sad snowman. And that's kind of our gingerbread man for this year. Next slide, please. So there's a word that I don't really embrace, and it's coping. And sometimes that's all that we can hope to do is coping is just, it's successfully struggling, but sometimes it's just struggling with the difficult challenges of our situation. Let's go to the next slide and see what we can do about coping. You know, part of it is our attitude. It's our perception to the situation. You know, if we believe that we shouldn't be going through this, that the person we're caring for shouldn't be going through this, why us? You know, he was a good man, she's a good woman. Why do they have to go through this? Why our family? We just got through this other ordeal. That makes it more difficult. Just accepting that the suffering does help and not judging the fact that it's there. Accept that what we're going through is normal and we'll acknowledge the losses and the changes and the challenges. Recognize that our feelings are not abnormal. You know, those feelings that we have after the person goes to bed, that we feel maybe I don't love him or her enough. And it's not that, it's just shifting away from not accepting to what's happening to accepting what's happening. And that's a big, big shift to accept what's happening and say, this is what's happening in life now. And what really helps is to stay connected with other people, with resources, with support groups, with a good caregiving buddy, somebody who's been through it or is going through it, that you can just pick up the phone almost 24/7 and express it and not be judged and not be told you'll get, you know, you're doing a good job and, you know, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, but to be told it's tough and it seems like you're holding on there. So those really do help to understand what we're going through is normal and to have somebody to talk with about that. Next slide. You know, and I think for caregivers, you know, I look at why us, and I don't say that in a negative way, like why me, but why does it fall to us in the family? You know, there's a reason. It's circumstances. You know, somebody's not working or somebody has the right attitude or the right skills or they're a retired nurse or social worker or whatever it is, but it falls to this primary person in the family with others hopefully supporting. But I think the important thing is to keep in mind that we can't do it all and we shouldn't be doing it alone. You know, that's where reaching out to others helps. Again, AARP has a good program, Prepare to Care, and they talk about creating a caring team. And that's people we can call on, be it nursing, medicine, a drippy faucet in the house, financial issues, things like that. Think about a team, and that makes it a little bit less isolating and a little bit more manageable, and maybe we can find that joy in there somewhere. Next slide, please. So look for the good. You know, I hate when people say, well, look for the silver lining and all the cliches that we hear. So I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying that this is not a tough situation, but look at sometimes the undesirable things that we don't have. You know, we don't realize that it can be worse. We don't realize that maybe it was worse and it's better. And somehow that's where going to support groups, whether they're online or if we can ever get back together in person, just to hear what others are going through, maybe we can walk out of that meeting or that session and say, wow, It could be worse, you know, and not pitying them, but and not making strong comparisons other than to know that it could be worse and it's not. So let me have maybe some gratitude that it's not that bad. So look at the good things we have. You know, can I still communicate with this person? Does the person still eat on their own? Look at all the good in there. And I put the quotes on that word good because good is a judgment. You know, if it's good or bad, you can fill in your own word in there. And try not to compare the situation or the relationship with the way that it was, because it certainly is different. And we're going to get stuck into why is it not like it was? Why is it so bad? Why her? Why now? Why me? So next slide, please. You know, and I mentioned listening to others about their situation, but not comparing it with others, because we could find ourselves thinking, well, she's got it so much easier. How come they can afford help coming in and we can't? But just listening and turning back in towards ourselves to look at our situation. And again, don't look the way that it should be, because it's not. Those shoulds are not a healthy thing to think about. Look for the good. Look for the good in the situation. And stay in the present, you know, because if we start thinking about the future, it's probably not looking so rosy. If we think about the past, it's probably better than it was. So these are just some little ideas for looking for the good. Next slide, please. You know, gratitude is a really important state. It's an emotion, but it's a state, and it's almost a choice. There's a lot of research now showing that when we feel gratitude, the chemicals are released in our body that make us feel better, make the situation better, more manageable. William James, an early psychologist, philosopher, said the deepest craving of human nature is the need to be appreciated. And gratitude is really appreciation for what we have, for what we've been given, for what we can give. You know, and there's being mindful of the love and the connection with the loved one. You know, sometimes we can just sit down and look at the person we're caring for and maybe do a body scan and release the tension, if it's in our forehead, our shoulders, our stomach, wherever it is. Just release it and look at that person and smile and let the love come up that maybe is down deep under the stress. And ask yourself, what are you grateful for in the relationship now and over the years? What are you grateful for? What has this person given you? What have you been allowed to give to that person? Find the gratitude in there in the relationship. If I had a handout, I'd give it to you now. And if we had the time, I'd ask you to write it down, and then I'll come back to the group and discuss it. But we're not doing that kind of a workshop. But maybe you can think about this after this morning. Next slide, please. With the gratitude, what are you grateful for that you have received from your loved one? What have they given you? What life lessons? What financial support, emotional support? Maybe you learned it the hard way from what they didn't give you. You had to go out and learn to do it yourself. Maybe they didn't value things that you value, and you learned that you could go out and achieve whatever these are. But look at that, and what are you grateful for that you have received? And then express it. Tell her or him, even if they're in the depths of dementia and Alzheimer's, I believe they'll feel it and they'll understand. Look in their eyes and say, Mom or whomever, thank you for, and then you fill in the blank. Next slide. You know, I looked up gratitude, and this William Arthur Ward, you've probably not heard of him. I've not heard of him until now, but he writes a lot of sayings, and there's books that he's written about life. So look him up, and I looked up gratitude, and there's the website, this AZ quotes, and a lot of the things that are good. Then I like to have these little sayings in my life, and sometimes I print them out and refer to them, but feeling gratitude and not expressing it is like wrapping a present and not giving it. So tell the person we're caring for what you're grateful for. Thank them for it. Gratitude can transform common days into Thanksgivings, timely, turn routine jobs into joy, and change ordinary opportunities into blessings. Just getting mindful of what we're doing, just a non-caregiving experience that I had. About maybe 2 months ago, I was in Jacksonville and I was out in the yard, and I was on my hands and knees pulling weeds that were growing in the grass, and really getting into it, thinking about those weeds that were growing and how hardy they are, and they find their way in and pull them, and actually feeling the resistance as they're coming out of the ground and putting them in a pile. And then starting to feel the sun. It wasn't too hot that day. It wasn't too humid. Listening to the birds and getting mindful. And my wife, Kathleen, walked out and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm pulling weeds. It's really fun. I'm enjoying it." And she says, "This pandemic's been lasting too long. You got to find another hobby." But that mindfulness and the gratitude for what we have, the first hospice patient I ever visited made me very grateful that I could move my feet, that I could turn a key in a car and start the ignition, that I could drive. He was 23 years old and couldn't do any of those things. The last time he was in a car was in my car. He wanted to see it, and we went out and sat in it and didn't go anywhere, but just sat in the car and put the sunroof open and the seats back, and we talked. So the little things that we can do, gratitude. Melanie Beattie, many of you might remember her, said, "Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into accepting, chaos into order, confusion to clarity. It can turn a meal into a house into a home, a stranger into a friend." So looking at the little things and finding the gratitude and expressing it. God gave you a gift of 86,400 seconds today. Have you used one to say thank you? Try that today. Thank the person you're caring for, or thank anybody else, and you'll find, pay attention to what you're feeling and maybe what it does to them, and see what happens. Next slide, please. This is Mom. This is Leonard. Leonard's the one in the middle, the little doggy, and me. And this was December 29th. Mom was living in a skilled nursing facility in Vero Beach, and Mom's dementia was getting worse. And we would visit her, and we would go out into the yard there, and she still recognized us for the most part. Every once in a while, she would ask me, "Who is somebody?" And she knew that she knew him. Some of the things that I'm grateful for is that we could visit with her. I would be fully in the moment. She loved Leonard. We could bring Leonard to visit her, and I could just be with her. And I would sit there and think of all the times for the last many years since I was a little kid. I remember she would go up to the school to talk to my teachers. I remembered she would have lunch ready when I would come home from grade school. I remembered a lot of things she did for me, and I would thank her. I'd say, "Mom, you did a good job raising me. Thank you." Sometimes I would say it out loud, and sometimes I would say it quietly. One time when she was still at my sister's house, before she moved into the nursing facility, my sister said to her, we were driving down to Vero Beach from Jacksonville, "Jim and Kathy are coming to visit today." Giving her sort of the heads up on the change in the day that's so important. And Mom got this quizzical look on her face. So my sister knew enough to know she was trying to, Jim and Kathy, who were they? Where do they fit in? And all of a sudden she said, "Is Leonard coming too?" She loved Leonard. So the fact that we could bring Leonard and we could laugh at that and know that it wasn't Mom denying who we were, it was the disease. It was really a good thing to know that we could bring something to her life, even if it's Leonard. And when we walked in, she recognized us on some level. But I'm grateful that we could visit with Mom, that we could be there. A lot of times gratitude is thinking of things in the past, but mindfulness is bringing the present and finding the gratitude there. Next slide, please. Some of the things that will help during this holiday season: anticipating the unknown, is that possible? And being ready as possible. Next slide. Stress triggers. What's going to trigger something that's going to throw us off during the holidays, Thanksgiving meals? It could be anything of the five senses: a smell, a sound. It could be hearing the song that reminds us of other times with the loved ones in the past. It could be special events like going to church, temple, synagogue, cultural events that we go to. There are a lot of cultural events that bring back memories of the past, meals, birthdays, things that our loved one participated in and just won't be the same. Or it could be something as simple as somebody asking, how are you doing? You know, I think that's a tough question for people who are grieving and people who are caregiving. You know, we go through that whole thing in our mind when we hear it. Do they really want to know? Do they mean like, oh, fine, I'm doing great, thanks? Or do they really want to know? And now with COVID, it even adds another level there. How are you doing? Is it with COVID that we're isolating? Am I wearing a mask? What are we going to do for Thanksgiving? So there's just so many more. So that could be a stress trigger. Next slide, please. Holiday music certainly is. You know, I found a radio station here, and now that's all they're playing, and that's all they've been playing for about a week and a half now is the holiday music. I was enjoying the oldies, so I'm a little miffed at them. I had to find another radio station. No big deal. TV commercials, holiday cards. You see all the beautiful families on television. I just received a Thanksgiving thank you card the other day from somebody that I was doing some work with. Hearing others discuss their holiday plans, they seem to be so much more upbeat and better, to be judgmental, than ours. You know, just sitting there thinking about and feeling the anxiety over the holiday gatherings, if we are going to have them this year. You know, I'm conservative in many ways and non-conservative in other ways, but I'm conservative thinking, let's avoid this COVID and maybe have a virtual tofurkey dinner together. Remembering past holidays with loved ones, you know, we can have bittersweet memories and bring them up. Gift buying, you know, well, should I buy gifts this year? What about getting out to the stores? Are they going to buy gifts for the one I'm caring for? So many holiday stress triggers. I think it's important to identify them and come up with a plan in case it happens. Maybe just knowing that it's a trigger will help to minimize it. I remember I was working in a bereavement support group, which has a lot to do with caregiving. And one of the women there, this was in Texas, her husband had died that year, and her kids were up in Boston, and they were saying, Mom, spend the holidays with us. Come spend the holidays with us. Don't stay there alone. She had good friends in Houston. So she was trying to decide, should I go there with the kids? It'll be the first holiday season without, you know, my husband and their dad. Or should I stay here with my friends? And she knew that they had their life, isn't that what the parents think? And she didn't want to be in a burden, an imposition. So the group kind of talked it out with her, the power and beauty of a group, and they came up with a plan. She would tell them, and she did do this, I'll come up there, but I'm going to make a reservation at a hotel. And if I say, please bring me to the hotel, you will take me there. You will not try to talk me out of it, and you'll leave me until I call you back to come get me. And they said, okay, it's a deal. She called and made a reservation, gave a credit card number to hold it, and it was the first time she had ever made a hotel reservation in her life. She was really reaching out and doing some new things. She ended up going up to Boston for the holidays, came back, and the group asked her how it went, and she said it was really good. I had my plan, and just knowing that cut down on the anxiety. And I didn't call. I paid for the hotel, and it was the best money I ever spent because I didn't need to use it. So come up with a plan for these anticipated stress triggers for the holiday season. And so maybe without that anxiety, that sense of joy or gratitude can arise. Next slide, please. You know, again, this is a different year. So decide which traditions we want to keep and which we want to change. If you're the person who's always cooked, you have some good excuses this year not to cook. You've got caregiving, you've got COVID, you've got I'm tired. Claim what you can do and not do. Create new traditions. You know, we're doing a whole lot more on Zoom than we've ever done before. Could you do a Zoom get together? Just think about the cleanup after that. It's one click. It's not the dishes and the tablecloth and leftovers. So think about new traditions this year. Make it simple. And if you are going to have a get-together of some sort, communicate with the people with whom you'll spend the holiday in advance to make sure they're all aware of the plan. How are we going to make it easier? Sometimes the person we're caring for, it's maybe fairly easy to get them upset, to rock them a little bit. So if there are ways that you want to protect them, let all know in advance. And then include the loved one as much as possible in the planning, so they feel like it's part of it and they don't get the sense of being ostracized or pushed out of the holidays too. And even if you think they're not understanding, I'm sure you still talk to the person if we're dealing with dementia. I know there's other diseases that people have that we care for them, but talking to them, keeping them informed, give them simple choices. Would you prefer this or this? Not what do you want for dessert, but do you want, the cranberry sauce, the apple pie? Or do you want apple pie for dessert? Something as simple as that, instead of what do you want for dessert? And that will just make the situation a little bit more tense with an open-ended question. So next tip, next slide, please. So some considerations, there are what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of needs that go into this holiday season. Our loved ones' needs, the physical, the emotional, the social needs of the person we're caring for, the needs of the family, because if we're a caregiver, we're usually taking care of more than just one person, but the rest of the family on some level. Friends' needs, if they're coming over or we have to tell them they're not. Cultural needs. There are a lot of cultural traditions, customs around the holidays, and sometimes we feel like we have to live up to them, or sometimes we want to live up to them and practice them, and they're just not possible, or we've not done them in years. And if it is something simple, that might be a good gift to give to the person you're caring for, is something from the earlier days. It could be something religious, it could be something from a heritage, it could be pictures, it could be a wreath of some sort, bread. So there are a lot of different things in there that could work for us or against us, the cultural needs. And then lastly on the list, and maybe lastly, your needs. What about you? Let's go to the next slide. Now, I know you're not going to sit there in the middle of Thanksgiving and do a little yoga, or it might be a good thing to do, slip in the next room and get mindful and just breathe and let go of the tension, but probably not, maybe next year. Let's go to the next slide. So simpler might be to put the needs in a different order. What about your needs first? Your need to make this holiday season a little bit simpler, a little bit more joyful. Not to put guilt on there, but our stress level sort of bleeds over to the person we're caring for, and their stress is up and down along with ours. Second might be the needs of the person we're caring for. If for the whole family has always come over, for the last forever, for the Thanksgiving or the other holiday dinners, they want to do it with Mom. We've always done it. Dad, you've always, had this at the house. Maybe not this year. Friends who might be involved, and then the cultural needs. And I put those both as 4, friends and cultural needs. Find the ones that will help, be selfish, and use them and invite them. Next slide, please. We're trying to find a balance of peace of mind and the responsibilities. I covered over a little bit on my screen, but I have put there the pressure of the last year. When we were caring for my mother-in-law and my mom, every year we would say this could be the last year, the last Christmas, the last Thanksgiving, the last birthday. And we'd always act that way, and we would decide to go and fully participate in whatever. And that gave us a sense of, this is really worth it, and better than that, this is really good. And we would be fully present. So the pressure of the last year is there. And I think pay attention to it. I remember my father, who died many, many years ago now, whenever I'd visit him in New York, I'd always give him a hug goodbye and think, this could be the last hug. This could be the last visit. And I'd always be mindful and conscious and present of that. And I had a sense of gratitude that I had a father and what he'd given me and done for me over the years. So the pressure of the last visit, the pressure of the last year, we can turn that around into something positive, hopefully. Next slide, please. Um, there are the four things that matter most. It's a book, been out many years now, by Ira Byock. He's a hospice physician. And I think these are important to keep in mind. We don't have to do them all, but think about them. You know, when we're with our loved one, honor the time with them and be present and think about things. If there's anything we want to say, please forgive me for something, we could say it in our mind or we could say it out loud. I forgive you if there's something that that person has done that you're holding on to. Thank you, and I love you. And according to Dr. Byock, those are the four things that matter most that he's seen in working with patients over the years with his hospice work. And think about them. And you can get the book on Amazon, of course. Next slide. Other ideas, we talked about set reasonable goals and expectations. Simplify. This is not the year to be perfect. Give yourself permission to say no. Remember, you have some good excuses this year. And know when to ask for help. And ask. Don't just know, well, this is when I should be asking for help, but ask for help. People like to help other people, especially if specific requests are made. Next slide. I want to thank you. I'm grateful that you attended this morning. I want to thank you for accepting the role of caregiver. And I know that you're either a caregiver or a caregiver of caregivers. There are people here who work with caregivers. It's a very demanding and it's a job. It's a rewarding gift you're giving your love. It might not feel it at times, but it really is. I'm grateful that you are doing this and there are people like you in this world doing this. It makes it so much of a better place. And as they say here in the islands, mahalo, which is a big, big thank you. And I hear that probably 10 or 15 times a day. I hear it verbally. I see it on television. I see it on billboards. There's a big sense of gratitude here in the islands. Mahalo is what it's about. So we'll, I guess, go to questions and answers or comments at this point.
Thank you so much, Jim. I think that was wonderful. I definitely took something out of it. I think that right now, when there's a lot of focus on gratitude, it's probably one of the hardest times to consider what to be grateful for, especially as a caregiver. The holidays are really difficult. I remember, you know, you think of being a kid and you get super excited for Thanksgiving and for Christmas, and the best time of the year, but, you know, it's a totally different experience as a caregiver.
It really is.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. So we'd like to get into Q&A and discussion, and I say discussion because maybe you don't have a question, but maybe you had a thought while Jim was talking. Maybe you had an experience that was similar to something that he said, or that was, you know, that just came up in your mind. So I encourage you, you know, put it into the chat and I'll read it out loud. The chats are private, they only go to me, so I won't identify you if it's something a little bit personal. But I'm gonna go ahead, I put the chat somewhere. I gotta find where I put it. Okay, here we go. So feel free to type something into the chat and I will read it out loud. But I guess, Jim, just to start us off, and I'm gonna stop screen sharing real quick too, just so you can all see each other's faces. So Jim, just to start us off, you know, with the restrictions this holiday season, with the social distancing, with, you know, maybe that fear of going to the grocery store, God forbid you want to get presents for Black Friday. Thankfully, stores have started doing Black Friday earlier, so you can get in before a crowd. But, you know, there's a lot of changes, and I think that us, you know, we may be able to cope with them, but maybe we have a loved one that has dementia, whether it's early stages or late stages, who is not understanding all the changes and maybe getting negatively affected by it. Maybe you're noticing that your loved one's getting more depressed. Maybe they're having more anxiety because they sense, you know, something is going on. How do you bring joy to your loved one in addition to yourself. We can think about our gratitude and what we're grateful for, and we can do little things for ourselves, but how do we make sure it doesn't bleed into the other, our loved one, and how do we make sure that they're also experiencing that?
Before I answer that, is there anybody here who has an idea for that? How can we bring joy in the midst of all of this? Just so we don't have silent air, I'll give you time to type in. I think, again, it goes into getting into the moment. And if the person doesn't understand, or if a loved one doesn't understand the pandemic, the COVID situation, just say we want to go to the store. We want to do that. Somebody just typed in smile more. I think that's it. Maybe that's a really good one. Don't show our anxiety, our disappointment, and say, Mom or Dad, we can just sit here. We can be with each other. We can't go to the store right now, but what can we do together? Do you want to play a game? Can I read to you? Do you want to listen to music? What about that movie we've been wanting to watch? I think you'll get into the moment, and if they're not going to understand the situation, don't try to explain it, but just pull them in and maybe divert the attention.
Right.
A
lot can be said for Christmas movies.
What, excuse me?
I said a lot can be said for Christmas movies.
Yeah.
Get into the holiday spirit is just turn on the Hallmark Channel.
Yeah. And hold their hand.
So I like that. Smile more. Somebody said it's hard.
I like that. Smile more. I'm going to put that in here. Smile more. Thank you.
I love that. So we had someone share what I have found most difficult during the holidays is the need to be with my mother here in Jacksonville in assisted living and not be able to go visit my kids and grandkids. Sometimes they can come here, but generally not. And that's true, especially now. You can't get the whole family together. And it feels like something's missing.
Something is missing. It's not the way it was, and it's a whole new world. It's a whole new world, and we have to find a way to make it better for ourselves. It's not as it was, and all of a sudden we can find some gratitude for the way it was last year, and hopefully next year will be a little bit easier.
Someone had shared learning to accept my caregiver position and finding ways to be thankful for the purpose God had given me, but I feel upset sometimes on the fact that my loved one is born with a rare disease.
Yeah, I think that's big. Learning to accept the caregiver role is big. It reminds me of a statement. We did a similar workshop at Potter's House a while back, and there was a woman there, and we were talking about expressing and validating, and she said she was caring for her mom, she had moved in, was living with her, and she was at wit's end one Saturday. Just couldn't take it anymore and just felt so claustrophobic and had to get out of the house and do something. So she arranged for, I think, her sister to come in and stay with Mom. And she knew there was a support group going on that day, and she was getting dressed and getting ready to go. And finally, fixing herself up to get out of the house for a change. And her mother looked up and she says, "Where are you going?" She says, "I'm going to a caregiver support group." Mother says, "Who are you caring for?" She said, "Forget it." She says, "I just went back to bed at that point. Didn't even recognize that I was caring for her." So look for places to find gratitude and validation, and maybe it's not from the person we're caring for. We have to find it sometimes just within ourselves. I see there's another comment.
Christmas has not been the same for me as it was for me as a child. Personally, I'm so glad to see the Christmas music and the movies. And I feel like sometimes the music and the movies come earlier and earlier every year. For some reason, I remember being a kid and I didn't even think about it until it was Christmas time, and now you see November 1st, you start seeing the Christmas trees go up, you see the lights go up. But there is very much something to appreciate there, and being able to get into that Christmas spirit and experiencing those same things. And you talked about triggers, Jen, but there are also positive triggers. Christmas music gives you that kind of warm, fuzzy feeling, that feeling of, I guess almost like a relief, because it's so familiar. You've been hearing it your entire life. And same with the Christmas movies.
Right. Yeah. So we can focus in on the good feelings that come with it, not the thoughts of what we don't have this Christmas time. Yeah. What are some other things that people are grateful for?
I would love to see that in the chat. Something that you're grateful for right now, maybe something that you're proud of, maybe something that you've accomplished. I think that COVID-19 has caused us to be a lot more resilient than we thought we could be. So maybe you did something, or maybe you accomplished something, or even you just, overcame something over the last several months that a year ago you would not have thought possible. So feel free to put that into the chat. We would love to share that as well. We have a comment here. I've really struggled with being isolated physically from my mom for 6 months and still with limited types of visits. This isolation is very difficult.
It is. It really is. For the other person and ourselves, it's just not what we want. And might sound strange, but I think people will understand. We're grateful that Mom died February 14th and not April, whatever, that we could visit with her till the very end and be with her at the very end. She missed this whole COVID thing, and so did we with her. This is really adding so much more into the situations and into the caregiving, and it's finding ways to communicate. There might be electronic, might be writing, whatever they are. And sometimes if somebody's in a facility, a community, a lot of times the staff really wants to help us communicate, and they will do what they can on their end if they're asked. Maybe they won't call and volunteer, but if you ask, can you hold a phone up or get FaceTime going, maybe they can help us do that. I know it's not the same, but we have to look for different ways to exist and cope now.
There's that big word again, cope.
Yeah.
So we've got some more comments in here. We just have a few more minutes before we have to close out, but I really want to share these. We had, I'm grateful for my faith in God. Scary to think how I would be coping without it. The big word again, and it's very true. We have, I'm grateful that I have this interaction. I think that that's the blessing of the virtual world is, we're having these workshops, and there's the virtual support groups, and there's the FaceTime, and you can really have that social connection. I think it was the phrase that was pushed at the very beginning of the pandemic was, wasn't it like social distancing, but not social isolation? Still being able to maintain that connection, even if it isn't that face-to-face in the flesh interaction. That's really what we've been trying to do with these virtual workshops, is still have interaction, still have an outlet. Yeah. Let's see what else. I'm very grateful that my mom's dementia is not so severe that she can basically understand why I can't be with her. That's a big one. Yeah. I'm grateful to be able to see and be with my very sick child every moment I can get to be with her. That's a blessing. I spent most of my time caring for my husband and have given up my social time with friends. I think people are struggling with that. Yeah. Because it's harder to run out and just get about, maybe a half hour with friends now than it has been. It's the rules have changed. The rules of life are different. I'm most grateful for my relationship with Jesus. He's helped me and my mother through all of this. We were stuck out of town for 11 months in a hotel. Other than calling family to say happy holiday, is it okay to ignore that it's a holiday? I think that's a really good question. You can tell me you went to this workshop and they gave you permission to ignore it. There you go. I'll send you a note if you want. I've known over the years when people were taking cruises, they would take a cruise and try to ignore the whole thing, just get out of town. So yeah, permission this year to ignore is granted to everybody. You have to do what's best for you. And the thing with the holidays is they come every single year. Yeah. And some years it may feel better to celebrate than other years. And give yourself permission that just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean you have to do it. Your family is still your family, and you can still connect with them, even if that doesn't mean having a turkey on the table, opening gifts, getting together. That's okay. Let's see, I'm thankful for the internet and being able to see my grandkids. Again, that virtual connection. But the lack of touch is not replaced by anything virtual, unfortunately. So much depression and negative behavior result. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I miss hugs more than anything. Virtual hugs just don't get it. Very true.
Another big loss. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of coming up on the end of the time. I just now checked the clock and we've got 3 minutes until the end of the session. Thank you so much, everybody that's put something in the chat for discussion or a comment or a question. I do encourage you, something that we're doing this month for National Family Caregiver Month is, we call it Tell Your Story. And I'm going to share the page that's on our website right now. Once I find my Zoom, but it's an opportunity for you to share these very stories, these very questions, these things that you're grateful for, even if it's one sentence. You know, the purpose of it is, hopefully you can see it here on the screen. The purpose of this is for you to be able to encourage other caregivers or share your experience, whether it's specific to the holidays and the gratitude that you're feeling during the holidays, or specific to COVID-19, or maybe nothing like that. It's something you woke up this morning and you said, wow, I am so glad that I woke up this morning and I was able to say good morning to my family. You know, so no matter how short, please, you know, we encourage you to come onto our website, caregivercoalition.org, and submit your story. It gets sent to my email. We can share it publicly or not. I'll reach out to you and confirm about that. But there's a big yellow button here that says submit story, and that's just going to connect you to my email, and you can just share whatever you'd like to share. You can put pictures in there, pictures of your family, things that make you happy. You know, you are more than welcome to do that. So I really encourage you, just pop on our website and share the exact same things that you've been sharing here in the chat. So
Good idea.
Here towards the end of our time, I'm going to share my other screen now. Oh, Zoom. We, at the end of our sessions, like I said here at the beginning, is we like to do a poll. And this poll is very quick. It's only, I think I had 5 questions there. And it just helps us to improve these sessions in the future. We want to make sure that what we're addressing is something that you actually care about and is something that's relevant to you. We want to make sure the sessions aren't too long or too short. So this poll is going to come up on your screen. I'm going to launch it right now. And if you could just answer the questions, everyone that answers is entered to win a $50 Amazon gift card. And I put all those names onto, it's called the wheelofnames.com, and spin the wheel, and it's randomly generated, and I'll send you an email just to confirm that your email is good to go and I'm not sending it to a typo email. And if you respond to that, I will forward you the Amazon gift card. So just take a few minutes to answer that poll. And while you're doing that, there was something that I thought of while Jim, you were speaking. It was a quote that I heard at one point. And it says, it's not the joy that makes us grateful, but it's the gratitude that brings us joy. And I think it's a chicken before the egg thing, but that's something that's really important to remember, is sometimes you may think, well, I'm not happy, so what can I be grateful for? But there are still things to be grateful for. So hopefully this spoke to you. Hopefully this said something to you. Just closing us out now. Like I said, as you're answering those poll questions, please submit your stories. Submit the things that you're grateful for. Caregivercoalition.org. There's a page there called National Family Caregiver Month. It's right under the events calendar tab. Feel free to check it out and see what we're looking for, and hit the big yellow button for submit your story. And then lastly, we are planning our last workshop of 2020 in the month of December. It's going to be Saturday, December 12th, and we're talking about coping with the holidays. And while that may sound similar to what we talked about today, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to kind of focus on the grief and focus on, you know, how do you handle the difficult situations with your family when your family isn't understanding, you know, it's the holidays. Why are you so stressed? Why are you having such a hard time? Why can't you just be grateful, you know? So kind of a similar but different, but I think that the holidays are so important when we're talking about caregiving. and there's so many issues that can get brushed under the rug. So join us on Saturday, December 12th. Please sign up for our Caring Together newsletter. That's how you'll get announcements right to your inbox, and it's going to have the registration link for the workshop and more information. We also send out resources. We send out stories. I have our winter newsletter is going to come out in a couple weeks. So feel free, caregivercoalition.org, and you can subscribe to that Caring Together newsletter. And it's a good way to keep in touch with us, as well as Facebook. You can find us, the Caregiver Coalition of Northeast Florida, on Facebook. So if you have any other questions, you can reach out through the website. When you scroll to the bottom, there's a contact us little box, and you can just type into there, and I will respond to you. If I don't have the answer, I will connect you with whoever has the answer. So all those messages get sent straight to me. So that is it for what we have today. Thank you to everybody that has filled out the poll questions. Thank you to everybody that has put more in the chat. Jim, you can look that over. That's for everybody. So I appreciate everybody that joined us today. Jim, grab another cup of coffee. I see it is now 6 a.m. there in Hawaii.
Candace, I want to thank you for arranging this today and all the work. You really have added so much to the Caregiver Coalition. Jacksonville and surrounding areas are lucky to have you doing what you're doing. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. So everybody enjoy the rest of your Saturday. I'll keep an eye here on the chat. And if you had other questions here in the chat that we didn't get to, I will reach out to you. I have your emails, so I will make sure that we've got you covered. So thanks again so much, Jim, and thanks everybody that joined us today. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday and holidays.
Bye-bye.